Hey everybody, Matt here for Imagine Then Make. Thanks for stopping by. In a recent video, I described how I use a circular saw with a guide to replace my need for a table saw. In today's video, I'm actually going to demonstrate how I do that. So I'm going to start with this 1/4 inch piece of MDF. It's 2 feet this way, 4 feet this way. And I need to cut out these pieces to make that box over there, right there. And actually I'm making a whole bunch of them. So a little later, or maybe in the next video, I'll show you a little jig I made to make it faster to make the parts, to make the boxes. Okay, so I'm going to focus on this piece right here. It's 18 inches by 11.5 inches, and I'm going to use the circular saw and the guide to cut those pieces, as many as possible, out of this sheet. So the first big decision I have to make is which side of the saw plate am I going to slide along the guide. I could use this edge or I could use this edge. Well, because the motor's here and it kind of blocks my view, I tend to use this edge, but I could use either one. So the next thing I need to understand is what's the distance from the blade to the edge of the saw plate. So when I measure it with my tape measure, I measure 1 inch. So I know I want a distance of 18 inches here. Which is right here. But I know I need to position the guide 1 inch less than that. So I'm going to make a mark at the 17-inch distance. And then I'll make another mark at 17 inches here. And finally, I'll make a third mark at 17 inches here. Now I can take my guide. And my guide, incidentally, has 2 kinds of edges. It has a nice wide edge here, and it has a narrower edge right here. So I'm going to slide my saw along the wider edge. This narrower edge is very handy when I want to draw a nice long straight line. I can use this edge. But for guiding the saw, I'm going to use this edge. So what I want to do is line up the guide right on my 17-inch mark, and I'm going to take some real simple clamps, and at first I'm just going to kind of loosely clamp it and go over to this side and loosely clamp again, and then check to see where my middle mark is, and that looks like it's spot on. So I'm in good shape. My measurements are accurate. So I'm going to tighten that clamp and tighten this clamp, and now I'm actually that much closer to making the cut. So you probably noticed these blocks. I made these quite a long time ago and I use them often. So I just use these blocks to lift the MDF off of my table, so when I run the saw down the guide, I'm not cutting into the table. Okay, so the other thing that I need to pay attention to, there's another block right there, and there's another one down there, and then there's the first one right here. I just want to look underneath the board and line it up with where the guide is to make sure that my saw blade is not going to run into any of my wood blocks. Now, it's not the end of the world if it does. I just prefer not to have that happen. So I'm just about ready to go. I just want to double check the setup of the saw. Remember, the battery is out, so there's no danger of the saw accidentally getting turned on. One of the things I want to do is verify that the blade is 90 degrees to the saw plate, and that looks pretty good. Just using the angled piece from a combination square. So that looks pretty good. Incidentally, I'm using a thin kerf circular saw blade. The next thing I want to do is verify that the saw blade depth of cut is not really too large. So it looks like I have about a half an inch there. I'm cutting through 1/4 of an inch thick material, so this depth of cut I think will work just fine. I'm going to put on my hearing protection. One last double check. Yep, all clear. Time to make the cut. If I take my tape measure, measure 18 inches, and 18 inches. So it's a pretty accurate cut using a circular saw and a guide. So really, that's all there is to it. Just know the distance from the blade to the edge of the saw plate that you're going to slide along your guide. Make your marks for where you need to set up your guide, clamp it in place, slide the saw through, and you make a nice accurate straight cut. Of course, if you put the guide in the wrong spot, you're going to have an inaccurate cut. But the beauty of this method, in my opinion, is that you don't have to just do straight cuts, meaning 90 degrees. You can put the guide really at any angle that you need. So if you were cutting triangular pieces or some other weird geometric shape, not just a square or a rectangle, you're really free to set the guide anywhere that you need to make your straight cut. So it gives you a lot of flexibility. You do have to be careful where you set your guide because that determines how accurate your cut is going to be. I also want to say that the more cuts you make using this method or approach, the faster you'll get at it. You'll just get into a rhythm and you'll find that you can make some very accurate cuts pretty rapidly.